One of the relevant bits of news in our latest large batch of changes and additions from Blizzard for this new latest build of the Midnight Beta. You also had things like the added features of the damage meter being introduced, a few more QLs for our UI, the balance tuning we have looked at yesterday, yet another very boring and flat new login screen. Some cool other extras like a new affix for early level Mythic +2 to Mythic +5 keys called Lindor Misguidance, which is going to light up certain trash packs, and defeating only those marked trash packs guarantees 100% trash count, as a way to introduce new tanks to Mythic Plus, give them some sort of pre-made route by Blizzard, for example. But the other thing that was added in this latest round of changes, which took a while to be noticed because it wasn't in the actual notes of the patch, it is what you get from actually doing dungeons, what you get from actually completing Mythic Plus keys, which is your weekly Vault reward. We had no mention of it in the notes, but players, of course, completing keys in Mythic Plus in the beta looked at their Great Vault, looked at what the Great Vault was telling them they were gonna get in this latest imaginary Great Vault in the beta. And what was noticeable is that we have had a complete shift from what we mentioned about a month ago, which was this. This was the big change, supposedly, coming into Midnight, the fact that you were raising the max level reward from Mythic Plus from a +10, from your weekly +10 of right now, of the War Within, or even +12 if you wanted the max gilded crest per key completion, all the way up to a +18. That's because Blizzard was raising the max level reward from Mythic Plus to be a mid-track 4 out of 6 piece instead of a mid-track 1 out of 6 piece. Now this was further relevant because as of right now we have been testing keys in Mythic Plus, and we can see from the standard base item level that you are given from Blizzard when you test Mythic Plus keys in the beta, since right now you are getting standardized in Mythic Plus keys at 289 item level, which is basically mid-track 6 out of 6, it's like max level mega end of season level gear, and even with that gear, even with that bump up in item level from the testing, players are getting into the +20 key level. And these are the very, very highest of keys right now in the beta, with max level gear from the season. So obviously, scale this item level back. Go back to the beginning, early moments of the season when you're stuck doing Mythic Zeros. You just entered normal and heroic raid. You're starting to do your +6, +8, +10. The item level in that range is back down to 265. To 270. So obviously with the news that if you wanted the best possible item level you had to go all the way up to a +18, that was speculated to be very, very challenging in the first weeks of the season. You would have had to go and try to do a type of content which would have rewarded you from the Great Vault with a piece of 282 item level gear, as you yourself would have been around 20 to 15 item levels lower. It was going to be a very rare occurrence. It was not going to be, as we were pointing out, something that you would have done as easily and as chill and relaxed and laid back of a way as you're doing right now your weekly 10s or your weekly 12s. It would have been much more challenging. But of course, some players were very happy at the news because while you had an increase in challenge, you were also going to get an increase in gear, an increase in loot. So you at least have the matching reward for the extra challenge of completing a much higher level key. This was further made more interesting because of the increase in costs in upgrading your gear in Midnight compared to the War Within. Increases now go up by 10 per level and continue to go up by 10 per level. So upgrading a piece of gear in its entirety from 1 to 6 will cost you 150 crests, which is way more than even the weekly amount of crests you will be able to get. So the notion that now in Midnight you were able to jump from receiving a mid-track 1 out of 6 piece to a mid-track 4 out of 6 piece meant you were saving 60 crests, because the 1 out of 6 to 2 out of 6 and then the 2 out of 6 to 3 out of 6 and then the 3 out of 6 to 4 out of 6 upgrades were getting discounted from the Great Vault. So it was also a way to offset the negative of the crest upgrades costing more in Midnight, the fact that you were getting a bigger discount from your Great Vault. Hopefully, of course, hoping that you were getting something actually usable from the Vault instead of a complete dud. Now, this change, as mentioned, despite not being officially written down in words by Blizzard, has been found out in actual practice, in the beta right now, as there is no more item level scaling, reward scaling past A plus 10 at the moment in the beta rewards. So, we are back valuing both ends of the coin and both ends of the deal. Now you're back no longer having any kind of stress or any kind of push for you to reach a plus 18, because that was going to be the peak of your reward in Mythic Plus. So you can chill much lower down in a plus 10, something that will be much more easily doable even in week 1 of the season without you having to worry any further. Basically the exact same thing we have right now in the War Within. You have essentially the same layout. A plus 10 will give you 266 item level loot and will get 272 item level loot from the Great Vault. The downside, of course, is that now this devalues and depowers the possible goals you could have gotten in a season for your Mythic Plus gear, for your Mythic Plus characters. Now you would have had an incentive to reach a plus 18 every week, not just with your main character, but if you were playing, for example, a DPS, a healer and a tank. Now you would have wanted to get to reach plus 18 on all 3 different roles to be able to get this higher item level reward from the Great Vault. That's gone now. At the very least at the moment, in-game, in the beta, it's no longer there. So you have not as many incentives as you could have gotten, or we looked like we were going to get from the beta up to a few days ago, before this change took place. It is also curious because you think maybe perhaps Blizzard was testing the interest in players for higher types of rewards from dungeons with the Deathless Tazavesh achievement they introduced in this last season. They tried to say, okay, how about we give you more mid-track pieces from dungeons if you go and just don't die in 2 runs in a row of a mythic, basically a mythic 10, the equivalent of a mythic plus 10 in Tazavesh. One of the other complaints, biggest fears, or perhaps biggest wishes of some players, of course, was the boosting, right? If you increase the max reward from Mythic Plus from a plus 10 to a plus 18, there is going to be a significantly large chunk of players who would have reached a plus 10 by themselves, who are not able to, do not have the time, do not have the grind mentality, or perhaps simply don't want to get into challenging enough content at that level, who are simply going to pay. Right? So obviously if you put in-game the rewards all the way up to a plus 18, you are going to in some way advertise more and popularize more, selling the runs to make you reach plus 18 so you can get your higher item level mid-track reward from your Great Vault from Mythic Plus. You could say there is still the 3000 rating achievement kind of rewards, but that achievement of course doesn't come with gear, first of all, and at the moment that kind of rating in Midnight would be lower than you reaching plus 18s for this higher Great Vault reward. Perhaps another point could be Blizzard's afraid of another Dragonflight Season 2 reboot. For players who don't remember or weren't there, that was the time Blizzard for the first time introduced the crest system as we have it now, and that was a complete failure. A complete failure on their end and on most players' end. Many were still happy about how it turned out. They were happy because you were able to get max gear in 2 weeks. In a couple of weeks, you were basically decked out in max item level gear from the way item level was scaling back then, and how easy it was for you to simply cap the item level of your gear. So perhaps this could have been a response from Blizzard at the fears that if we also give you a mid-track 4 out of 6 piece for everyone who gets to a plus 18, we are giving you too much gear, you are skipping, you're getting too many discounts of crest spending because you go from mid 1 out of 6 track up to 4 out of 6. You are saving 60 crests per week in free upgrades from the vault. That makes you gear too fast, so we are removing that kind of reward. That could be another possibility. There was definitely going to be, regardless of the choice, a divisive option, because nowadays it's a clear thing. Players expect as a goal to reach the max item level key reward in Mythic Plus, like it's a given, like it's obvious. So if Blizzard were to raise it at plus 18, suddenly you would have had many players, you know, headcanon, napkin math, 70 to 90% of players in the first month of the season would not have been able to reach plus 18s to clear comfortably for their gear rewards. So perhaps also Blizzard might not have wanted to reach that kind of friction within the player base. You know, they were shivering at the thought of starting to hear all of the complaints, all of the annoyances of a disgruntled player base because they were stuck at doing plus 12s or plus 14s and couldn't reach 18s for their max item level reward from the Great Vault, something that for the past expansions, pretty much ever since the Great Vault has been introduced, reaching the max reward from Mythic Plus has always been quite easy. As long as you do some level, average level of competitive content, reaching a plus 10 to get your max reward has always been more or less easy. Much easier, of course, than filling your vault with mythic bosses in the raid, for example. So maybe they thought, yeah, if we up the reward from Mythic Plus as well, then we're gonna have a ton of players who can't get the max reward from Mythic Raid, and now they can't get the max reward from Mythic Plus either, because they can't reach a plus 18, so better not. Let's roll back on this change and stop at plus 10 again. Obviously, all of this argument could be completely null. Maybe this was a little prank on some of the coding of the release of the patch, which just mistakenly lowered the rewards back to plus 10. They forgot to keep it at plus 18 like it was in the previous builds of the beta, and it was completely unintended. Or maybe it is, and we have to scale back our rewards from Mythic Plus for Midnight. As I said, anyways, either side of this choice, whether it was stopped at plus 10 or raised back up to plus 18, you were going to get one side of the argument to complain about the choice anyways. What remains though, regardless of which side you were on, is the fact that now we go back at having this sort of a wasteland, a barren, deserted ambient where you don't really get much by doing Mythic Plus in the plus 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 range. There isn't really, you are far away from title, you're far away from very high key levels, you're far away from that level of competitive content, and you also start to get far away from the max level reward. The max level reward was a plus 10. At best, for max Gilded Crest acquisition, it was plus 12. You're currently doing 14s or 15s or 16s. You're well past that level, and you are in the middle of nowhere. You're not really gaining anything more. There is no incentive. You're not waiting for a full set of transmog gear for reaching all plus 15s, or a new mount or a new title for reaching plus 17s. You're not unlocking an extra socket in your weapon for completing all 16s, or perhaps an extra special enchant on your gloves if you do all plus 18s. There is like nothing in that range now. Before, up to this point, you would have had the push, the incentive of reaching plus 18 for gear. Now that that's gone, it goes back to being a bit unsatisfying again. That's perhaps what we are back to having as a bigger problem if this change is confirmed. We only have it for now confirmed in-game, not directly from Blizzard. We will see if this will be confirmed, as it had been the last time they upped it to plus 18 without an announcement. It was just found out in-game, and it was confirmed for a couple of months, and then it was, as of right now, removed again. We will see how this will shape up. But for today, this is the news related to Mythic Plus and to your weekly rewards from the Great Vault. The removal, for the moment, of the higher level scaling of Mythic Plus reward from plus 18 keys all the way back down to where we have them now, at plus 10s. So, with this, moving towards the beginning of our weekend on this Friday, it is now time to leave each other. We are starting the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I would have been fine with a plus 18. Perhaps the best solution is to introduce it in the 12.0.5 patch, a couple of months into the season. With better gear, 2 months in, it should be easier for everyone to reach 18s.